The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. The Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brodinsky. On my right, the editor of the Record Journal, Ralph Tomaselli.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Ralph. We got, I want to talk about ethics first.
Okay.
Something we've talked about on the show from time to time. The town council has been wrestling with a revised code of ethics for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
They are, and it's in part because it was thought that charter revision had made some provisions of the code of ethics obsolete or subject to review, and so that's a good reason to review the whole thing from top to bottom. Now, the code of ethics isn't all that long. Mm-hmm. But there are some changes. The question that I want to raise tonight is whether some of the issues that have been out there have been addressed in one way or the other. But I want to frame the issue in a certain way, and I didn't have a chance to intentionally go over this with you off camera as we prepare for the show. I intentionally wanted to ensnare you in my trap. I intentionally wanted to lure you in, okay? Because that may help frame the issue. So just supposing, in Wallingford, guy's walking down the street, takes out a gun, intentionally shoots somebody, is arrested, and the legal process is implicated, the whole trial and all the whole thing. Who decides whether intentionally killing somebody is a crime? Who decides that?
Whether it's a crime?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's a
let
crime.
me take a...
See, it's not that obvious a question.
No, it's not. No.
It's not that obvious a question. But who decides that?
Okay, I'll just...
I know, it's...
the way I would answer it
Yeah.
is police decide whether there's probable cause for an arrest. Police consult with a prosecutor who decide whether to go forward with charges. Okay, all right,
You flunked.
Okay,
I got to tell you.
Okay.
You flunked. It's the state legislature
Right.
who passes the laws against murder.
I would have gotten to that,
No,
but you kind of cut me off. You
I
flunked
know, and
me
I took you
before.
by surprise. But
Okay.
I think the natural reaction
Sure.
on ethics,
Right.
if you ask someone, well, who decides if
Right.
that particular conduct, let's say a commissioner or a counselor voting on something they shouldn't vote on, who decides if that's an ethics violation? And a lot of people say, oh, the ethics commission.
Mhm.
And you flunk the test if that's
Sure.
the answer. Because the decision as to what is ethical and unethical is in the code of ethics. That's where it shall all be laid out. And who decides that? The council.
Okay.
They are the legislature of the town of Wallingford. So I know the knee-jerk reaction to say, well, I don't know if that's ethical or not. Let's ask the law department. You flunked the test. You flunked the test. And well, then let's go to the ethics commission. They decide. No, you flunked the test.
Okay.
You should be able to read the code of ethics, just like you can read the criminal code in the state of Connecticut, and see what is permissible, what is impermissible, what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. There should be a bright enough line around, the good conduct or the bad conduct, so someone can know, just like in the criminal code, you just can't kill somebody. So let's talk about the Southington situation, which is an example of the point that I'm getting at, which is whether or not an employment relationship should be grounds for a commissioner or a counselor to recuse themselves if, let's say, an employee is sitting on our board or commission and the employer is at the table looking for something.
Sure.
Okay? And we have a lot of boards and commissions in Wallingford, as do a lot of towns. We have the PUC, Planning and Zoning, Zoning Board of Appeals, Board of Ed, and the Town Council. Now, in Southington, happened a few years ago, as I remember, there was a major project under consideration. It was a solar array.
Right.
It was huge, wasn't it?
Right.
And it was very controversial.
Absolutely.
It was big, it was worth a lot of money, and I'm ripping this from the headlines
Yeah.
and sort of recasting it in
I
a way
think
that
you've
it's
got
easy
it.
for me to explain.
Yeah.
There was a reason why this solar array, this big project, had to get the approval of the Southington Town Council.
Yes.
And one of the counselors, he's a Republican, it was a Republican-dominated council.
Right.
One of the counselors was employed by the guy who was sponsoring the project.
Right.
Now, it was a little bit convoluted in Southington because you had a lot of LLCs,
Yes, entities.
subsidiaries,
Right, right.
corporations. It was a tangled business web.
Right.
But there's no doubt about it that the guy pulling the strings, the hot body, the 98.6, the human
Right.
being that was calling the shots, employed or controlled the employment of the town councilor. Well, this became known, and it became known that the town councilor was in favor of his boss's project. Surprise, surprise, yeah?
Right.
So it went to the Ethics Commission. The Ethics Commission found probable cause, which meant hearings were now open. The Ethics Commission had, I think, multiple hearings with transcripts, high-priced lawyers, arguments, exhibits, and the chairman of the Southington Board of Ethics, a Republican, found there would be a conflict of interest if that Republican counselor voted on his boss's project. Well, politics being politics, under the Southington Charter, the employee was able to appeal to the Republican-dominated town council, who said, no, there's no conflict, and besides that, we're going to pay the employees legal fees, which were
Right.
thousands of dollars.
Tens.
Yes.
More than $10,000.
More than, yeah. And so the question is not, would that be allowed in Wallingford? That's not the question I'm raising. The question is, should it be allowed? Because now the Wallingford Town Councilors are reviewing the Code of Ethics from scratch. They can achieve right now any result they want to achieve, because again, they're drafting it from whole cloth. Let me stop, take a sip of water.
Right.
You can gather your thoughts as
Sure.
to where you think we are so far, and then we'll come back to it. Yeah.
Well, what I can't recall, and maybe this is part of the discussion in Wallingford, which is, as you pointed out, it is the Code of Ethics that governs these. And I don't think in Southington it was as clearly spelled out as some people would like, that you can't vote on an issue involving your employer.
Well, I think the Southington Code of Ethics was somewhat similar to the Wallingford Code of Ethics, and it talked about a non-financial interest, and I think the Ethics Commission of Southington decided that the employment relationship was sufficient.
Right.
There's no proof of bonuses or
Right.
raises for the employee or extra vacation time or promotions. None of that was alleged, I believe. None of that was on the table. It was just the dominance that the employer has over the employee.
Right.
Was that sufficient under the Southington Code? But again, the issue I raise is, what should be the results in Wallingford after this code, new code, revised Code of Ethics is passed? Do we want employees voting on their employers' matters? Or do we not care? Or do we want to run away from the issue, leave it vague, and then we say the lawyers decide it?
Right.
I mean, so I'm going to turn my camera over to you. I mean, you saw what happened in Wallingford. You guys covered it pretty well. You're pretty close
Right.
to it. You know what can come of it, and I'm just going to complicate it a little bit and give you a chance to collect your thoughts here. But take all the personalities in Wallingford and assume they've moved on.
Right.
They're no longer there.
Right.
A whole new, board and commission and a whole new council and a whole new PUC.
Right.
So it's not a personal thing, but business being what it is, business comes in front of, a Wallingford board, the employer's at the table, and the employee is on the board or a commission. Should it be in Wallingford that the employee votes on the employer's matter, on the employer's proposal? What do you think?
No.
Any doubt?
No, I don't.
Okay, I agree with you.
I think that.
I just wanted to lay
right.
it out in excruciating detail.
No.
So people understand the issue.
I can't think of
Yeah.
an exception.
Well, we will see what the town council does. It looks like they're looking the other way. They've had a year to work on this. They have not yet addressed the issue.
Right.
I don't think they want to address the issue, which means they've been confronted with it.
Right.
They have been directly confronted with this conundrum. But by refusing to act on it, there's an implicit understanding that, and in view of the history of some of the decisions by the Ethics Commission, et cetera, an implicit understanding that depending on the personalities, it's okay.
Well, that's what I was going to ask
It's
you.
okay.
Why is there a conundrum? Is it?
Well, because if the Wallingford Town Council decides to make it clear that the employment relationship is sufficient to require a recusal,
Right.
sufficient to require that a commissioner or a councilor not vote
Mhm.
on the employer's proposal, then he is in a hot spot. He's got to recuse himself on a lot of matters that come in front of the council because he's employed by the Board of Ed.
Right.
And that's it.
But
And if it wasn't for that, it'd be a different political landscape.
So just one.
That's how I'm reading it.
Yeah. Boy,
And-
that doesn't seem.
And the last time Benny Testa was on the show, we talked about it. When Tom Laughlin was here just, not that long ago, we talked about it. Again, all the counselors have been specifically presented, with this problem.
Right.
Yet there hasn't been any move to clarify. And the key word there was clarify. Just what do you want to do? What result, 9 counselors, what result do you want to have? Do you want employees voting on their employers' matters or not? Just make it clear, make it plain, so we don't have to guess,
Right.
and we don't have to have these kind of conversations. I don't think they're going to make it clear, but
Okay.
let's follow that.
Right,
And
good
we'll
idea.
bring it up,
Sure. I
at
think it's a
another-
good issue.
Yeah. Now, rumor has it that people have seen various Record Journal employees with e-cigarettes in their mouth. Any truth to that? Or can you
I actually haven't.
You haven't. All right.
No, no,
It was a rumor. It was unfounded.
I actually haven't. Although I do see a lot of e-cigarettes.
Yeah.
People everywhere using
right.
e-cigarettes, and one of the reasons it stands out is because they use them inside,
Yeah.
where people don't normally think about smoke. You wouldn't think to smoke
Yeah.
in a traditional sense. So
Yeah.
I do see them everywhere.
You do see them everywhere. So the issue now in front of the Wallingford Town Council is whether or not the councilors should pass an ordinance preventing the sale of e-cigarette and tobacco-like products to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, below the age of consent, below the age of 21, the old-time age of consent. And it seems like, as I read the Record Journal, the Hartford Courant, town after town, that's a rhetorical overstatement.
Right.
Got it. That's a device, rhetorical device. Town after town are passing ordinances that would prevent the sale of these the e-cigarettes to people under the age of 21, and the legislature may jump on board with that.
I don't think it's an overstatement because
Yeah.
this is also before the Meriden Town Council,
Yeah.
the Cheshire Town Council, and, as you mentioned, the state legislature. So I'm kind of curious myself as to why is everybody what is motivating everybody to act in unison on this?
Well, I'm going to put a question to you and put you
Yeah.
on the spot. There's an old political adage that says it's not good enough to do good.
Right.
You have to be seen doing good.
Yes.
So is this nothing more than politicians, from, one town after another, wanting to be seen on the right side of the issue, passing some feel-good legislation, some symbolic legislation that they probably know isn't going to have any effect or certainly any material effect on teenage smoking or nicotine addiction or anything else? Is that what this is all about? Or
Good
is there
question.
something? Well, that's why I'm asking.
You are.
I don't give you the easy ones, man.
Right, no, that's a tough one. Certainly, as you know, like Steve Knight, who writes an op-ed piece for the Record Journal,
Yep.
that was an issue that he raised. Craig Fishbein, our local council and legislator, that was an issue he raised. There were counselors in Cheshire. Most of that, I should say, now that I think about it, that accusation has mostly come from the Republican Party, whereas I think most Democrats who have spoken about it at all levels have. So there is a partisan. There's no doubt there's a partisan pattern to this.
So let's see what we can agree on factually.
Right.
Do we agree that passing this ordinance isn't going to have any effect or any material effect that we could demonstrate on teenage smoking or nicotine
We
use?
certainly can't sit here and say it's going to have an effect. So
Okay.
any
We
effect
can-
would be minuscule.
Okay. Can we also agree that it's probably not a good thing for anyone to use nicotine products?
Absolutely.
And
And
probably
that's an-
worse for younger people
That's
to
an
use it.
important part of this. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we can agree on that.
Absolutely.
So if you were on the town council and this ordinance came up and the language was, reasonable for your
Right.
your perspective, would you vote for it on the grounds that it's symbolic, but why not? Or would you vote against it? And what is the town council doing getting mixed up in symbolic feel-good legislation that isn't going to do anybody any good? I mean, how would you vote?
I would vote for it
Okay,
with the notion that
all right,
I want to send a message on this,
okay,
regardless of the minuscule impact that it might have.
okay.
And I would also vote yes, because what's the alternative? To vote no and then perhaps have that interpreted as, I don't think that, especially high school students, vaping isn't a problem. And those reasons would be open to criticism.
Yeah.
I'm just being frank with you,
Yeah.
that those are the reasons I would do it for.
I would vote the same way for substantially the same reasons. I'm not expecting too much out of the ordinance. I'm not expecting a lot of arrests or enforcement to change things. I don't think the passing the ordinance is going to hurt anything. The police chief apparently just said that he could handle the enforcement end of things. It sends a message for whatever that may be worth, whatever little minuscule, impact that may have. Wallingford is in the paper for maybe on a few occasions, sending out a signal as far as the Record Journal readership goes that vaping isn't good, nicotine isn't good, and maybe someone picks up the signals. Some parent, some kid, some older youth who might buy and then distribute, to
Right.
his younger friends or something. Okay, I think.
Just a point, though.
Yeah,
One
yeah,
thing that
yeah.
might turn me against this, so
Oh.
to speak,
All right. Well,
is the amount of time
Yeah.
taken up on this issue, because I do not believe that this issue should be time-consuming, because I do believe there are other priorities that are
Yeah.
much more important.
Absolutely.
So the fact in Wallingford that this seems to be dragging out, is starting. Maybe it could turn me against it, so to speak.
Yeah, let's just get it done.
Okay.
Let's
Right, exactly.
Just get it done.
Right.
The votes are there. There's going to be 2 or 3 votes against it. Outvote them, pass it, and you've done your job.
I dare say that even if I was someone on the other side of this, that I might listen. That was arguing the other points here. I
Yeah.
might just, think, let's move this along so I can get on to other things.
Fair
So,
point.
Okay,
Speaking of other things,
go ahead.
Folks may have heard about a new hotel that is proposed for that corner near the Hilton Garden Inn, near
Yeah.
the intersection of Route 68 and Route 91. Hilton Garden Inn went up a few years ago, but there's a proposal for another hotel and
Yeah.
maybe even a third hotel.
Yep.
The point of this segment on the show is not to editorialize whether it's good or bad or anything else, just pure information, that's all. And the information that I'm going to share with you and our viewers comes from the Planning and Zoning file. There's an application pending for a special permit, and what I took from the file, well, I photographed a couple things from the file, and Bruce is going to show them in just a second. But planning and zoning applications can change, so this cannot be seen as the final, absolute, rock-solid version of what's going on. Things are always subject to change. Bruce, let's get that first JPEG up there, and we'll see what it shows. This is an artist's rendition of what the hotel may look like. My understanding is a little smaller than the Hilton Garden Inn by maybe 20 rooms, give or take.
Okay.
Subject to change. I think if this was in color, it might look a little different. I don't have an opinion on it,
Okay.
but it's, some image is better than no image,
Right.
that's all I'm trying to get at. Let's take that down, Bruce, and see what comes next in the way of the images that we have. This is sort of the layout with the parking all around. On the left side of the screen is a proposed restaurant. I think in planning and zoning jargon, they call it an accessory use. I think I see 120 rooms there. And again, right near the ramp that leads from 91 North to Bristol Myers.
Okay.
That intersection right there. Bruce, let's see what else we got. So the blue and the red marking is mine. To help illustrate the location of this. The heavy black lines that outline the boundaries of the property are not mine. That came from the planning and zoning file. But you can see in the top of the JPEG, top of the photo, that's Interstate 91. The red line is Route 68. A lot of people call it Barnes Road. And where the blue line is, that's Research Parkway, that's going right by Bristol Myers. We're familiar with this intersection.
Yep.
And that's what it is. Bruce, we can take that down and we can see what Ralph is going to stay there for a weekend.
No.
No.
No, I'm not planning on it.
Oh,
To
okay.
see the that corner of town. No, I think we wondered when that last hotel went in whether,
Yeah.
at least I did. Was there desire? Was there
Demand? Market demand?
and
Seems to be doing pretty well.
Seems to be doing pretty well. There was an article that ran recently in the New Haven Independent about new boutique hotels going up in New Haven
Yeah.
because New Haven doesn't have enough hotel rooms, and it specifically mentioned that hotels were being proposed in both North Haven and Wallingford to deal with the lack of hotel capacity in New Haven.
Well, there may be another one after this, so we'll
Yeah.
try to keep on top of that and bring it to you when we learn more, bring you more information when we know it. Let's change the subject to how a mayor, how an executive of a town should hold a speech that he labels or she labels the state of the town, right? There was some raised eyebrows. I don't know why, because I don't think anything broke precedent here. That the mayor went to Ashlar Village, gave a speech. It's
Right.
not a news conference.
Right.
Gave a speech. It's a state of the town speech. He does it every year. It seems to be always at Ashlar Village. There's limited seating.
Right.
Like, not everyone can get in.
Nope.
It's someone's got to sponsor it, and so it's the Chamber of Commerce,
Absolutely.
the Quincy Chamber of Commerce. Ashlar Village has facilities, so they do it there. But it's not recorded by government TV. There's no videotaping. It's held in the morning or during lunch usually. It's hard for spectators to break away.
Right.
I noticed there was a comment in the Record Journal coverage that, are you ready for this?
Yes.
There was a comment in the Record Journal coverage. Democrats didn't go.
Right.
Did you see that?
I did see that.
Well, those rascally people Why didn't they go? Is that disrespect?
No.
They work for a living.
Yeah,
How are they
right.
gonna
Yeah,
get?
right.
They
And I
work,
don't
they
think it
have
was meant
jobs.
to
They
imply that they were
I don't know what it was.
goofing off.
I don't know. What was I don't know why they was in there.
Okay.
So, what's going on here? Where the mayor didn't want to videotape this stuff? A lot of people would watch it. I mean, nothing earth-shaking comes out of these things.
Right.
But what do you think is going on?
Doesn't he usually act as though this is the penny pinching mayor? Isn't that the?
Well, that could be. That's right. Yeah, that could be. Well, it raised some curiosity again, but this is how he always does it,
Right.
and probably always will.
Right.
A different style of mayor might give a state of the town address in town hall, maybe to an empty audience,
Right.
because the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce folks may not go. I mean, I
Right.
don't know. Maybe the attraction is the lunch,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of a nice setting with linen, like we have in the Citizen Mike Show
Right.
set. I'm going to get you a crystal glass. Okay, we've beaten that up
All right.
pretty well. The new grand list came out in Wallingford. It showed a little bit of an increase. Were you doing handstands over the little increase in the Wallingford
No, I was
grand
not.
list?
I was not. In fact, I was pining for the past.
What's the past? What's the
Well,
compare and
I
contrast
just,
story?
no, and,
you
and,
got,
and, and as I didn't mean to jump to that.
No,
but you asked me for my initial
I did.
reaction.
I did, yeah.
And of course, Wallingford cheering about 1.19% growth seemed odd to somebody who's been doing this for a while. So I did take a quick look back, and this isn't by no means one of your charts that shows grand list growth, but what I did find was an article that dates back to 2004, where Wallingford had a 1.2% increase, just slightly about what the increase was this year,
Okay.
and no one was happy with it. I mean,
Yeah.
no one was happy with 1.2. As I look back pre-recession, it seemed like 2% was more the line where people were happy. In other words, if they could get over 2% growth, they were happy. It wasn't unusual to have closer to 3% growth. So this notion that 1.19 in Wallingford they were cheering, in Southington 1% they were cheering, in Cheshire a little less than 1% they were cheering. So
maybe what this is more of a sigh of relief than
yeah,
anything
maybe
else.
you're right.
Because Wallingford has had very mediocre results on the growth of the grand list in recent years, and maybe just the fact that it didn't go down. The sigh of relief sounded like cheers of joy or something.
Good point, but we're talking percentages, and I don't have it in front of me.
I think it was 1.19, but it's like $1.4 million.
It's right, so it's not
taxes.
a 1% in most of the, in Southington and Wallingford translates to $1 million in new revenue, or 1.5 million in new revenue, which is not a lot.
Not a lot.
When you think of the size of the budget,
Yeah, it doesn't solve the budget.
it doesn't solve the budget.
No,
Sorry.
it doesn't.
Okay.
So let's change the subject to an issue that you and I had talked about a couple of weeks ago. It has to do with labor contracts. Now,
Yeah.
labor contracts, if you approach them the right way, can be very exciting. That was a sarcastic laugh. Okay. They can be I'll give you another chance at it. They can be very exciting. There's some drama behind some of these things, but you just got to know how to watch the council meetings, how to read the press releases, how to understand the official version of things. So this little story, this little segment comes out of really two council meetings that happened last fall. When two different, one was the personnel director and one was superintendent of schools, Sal Menzo, presented two labor contracts for consideration by the Wallingford Town Council, as if those labor contracts are very plain vanilla, very blah, very nothing unusual about them. But hidden in those contracts, in my humble opinion, was a bombshell. Okay, was a bombshell. Because those two contracts had language in them that said a union member had a choice: either join the union or pay agency fees as a condition of employment. And what's an agency fee? An agency fee is not quite a union dues. You pay union dues if you're a member of a union and you get the full benefit, the full package of services that a union might provide. But if you don't want to join a union, my understanding is that agency fees are somewhat less than full union dues. But they're designed to reimburse the union for the expenses they incur in representing employees in the ways they are required by law to represent employees. So to prevent freeloading, and that's the word, not my word, that's the word everyone uses, for those employees who don't want to pay union dues, don't want to pay agency fees, but want the benefits of being in the union, right? So that's what the contracts said, and they're sort of presented, well, nothing unusual here. But then they ran into Craig Fishbein and his conversation. We have a videotape of that in just a second. But the important background is that in June of 2018, roughly 5 months or so before these contracts were presented for approval. So, and the reason why I bring this up, these are not old contracts that had obsolete language that had been on the books for a while, and then a new Supreme Court case comes out and sort of blows the old contracts up. These were new contracts that were negotiated after the Supreme Court case came out, known as Janus, Janus versus AFSCME. And that Supreme Court case made it very clear that the language in the Wallingford contracts violated the First Amendment. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I'm going to read a little language, and then we're going to see the video, and then I have new information that I didn't have last time you and I discussed it.
Okay.
And so you got to wait for both of these.
Okay, I'll wait.
So the Janus opinion said in part, an agency fee, which we just described, nor any other payment to the union may be deducted from a non-member's wages, nor may any other attempt be made to collect such a payment unless the employee affirmatively consents to pay. By agreeing to pay, non-members are waiving their First Amendment rights, and such a waiver cannot be presumed. Rather, to be effective, the waiver must be freely given and shown by clear and compelling evidence. Freely given means it can't be a condition of your employment. You can't be discriminated against or have subtle pressure, like giving a statement to the police or something. You can't be coerced in any way. Unless employees clearly and affirmatively consent before any money is taken from them, the standard of deducting agency fees cannot be met. It's unconstitutional. So this was the background when Sal Menzo went in front of the Wallingford Town Council, and he and Craig Fishbein had this discussion. Bruce, let's tick that one off. 3, 2, 1, go.
We'll talk about what we've talked about before. And that's section 2.2 on page 3. So that provision says, all employees within the bargaining unit shall become and remain members of the union or pay a service fee allowable by law to the union as a condition of continued employment not later than 30 calendar days after their date of hire. An agency fee payer may apply to the union for a rebate in accordance with the union's existing procedures. And I think we all agree that that language is presently illegal. Is there any difference of opinion on that? Is there a belief by the board that that language is perhaps legal?
I think the belief that we continue to share with you at each contract that you bring this up, except for the one that we actually got the Janus language, which unfortunately you weren't here for, was the fact that all of our attorneys that have reviewed this, our district attorneys who we employ and we honor what they do in other districts as well, suggest that this language would then be negated by 18.2 if in fact it is interpreted as illegal.
We're gonna get to 18.2, but I just
so again, I think that we can get to 18.2, but I think we could probably, we're just talking about the same thing that we talk about, and I know that this is of an area of focus of yours, and I appreciate that. It's a passion of yours, but really the answer in going through 18.2 in this, to be very not to be disrespectful whatsoever, is the response is the same. Our attorneys who we trust, who represent other districts in similar circumstances, offer them the same advice as we've gotten, that while you're suggesting this is illegal, they believe 18.2 negates that fact, and that's all we could really say. So that's what we go with. That's what we trust in. That's what we pay them for. That's what other districts pay them for. They are the largest educational law firm in the state of Connecticut. You could ask the questions, but that's the response, again, respectfully to you. That
I didn't get a response. The question is whether or not it is the belief of the board that that language is legal. We can go to 18.2 because we're going to get there next. Is there a belief that it's legal?
I think that, again, to answer your question, you know the answer to that question. That it doesn't presently reflect the current statute.
Okay.
So here's what I didn't know when you and I had discussed the same issue a few weeks ago.
Right.
So bringing it up again. And an additional reason to bring it up, not only that I learned something in the past week, but there's more labor contracts coming in front of the council. I think one is coming next week, or maybe two are coming next week. I don't know if the same offending unconstitutional language is in those contracts, but there's probably going to be 6, 7, 8 labor contracts coming in front of the council in 2019. So let's you and I and our viewers get on top of this issue in case this discussion happens again.
Sure.
Got it? So what I didn't know is that, contrary to what the superintendent may have vaguely implied or suggested, the issue is quite clear. The Attorney General of the state of Connecticut issued some guidance all around the state, to school districts all around the state. Who was that? The Attorney General of the state of Connecticut issued some guidance. And he said employers may not deduct agency fees from a non-member's wages, nor may a union otherwise collect agency fees from a non-member without the non-member's employees' affirmative consent. And we read the part of the Supreme Court decision that says, it's a serious, freely given consent that has to be, that one has to get. But perhaps more significantly, the law firm for the town of Wallingford, it was described by the superintendent of schools, also issued guidance on this issue, widely distributed guidance on this issue. And they said in part, all agency fee deductions should cease immediately. Indeed, several large unions have already notified public employers, that would be Wallingford, to stop taking deductions. Specifically, any contract language that requires agency or service fees deductions was rendered illegal and unenforceable when the court handed down its decision in Janus. There you go. We'll see what happens in the future. Your thoughts?
Well, just that.
Yeah.
As anybody that's dealt with because what the superintendent seems to be saying is
what did he seem to be saying?
Right. Well, at least one thing that he's saying is that, in essence, the school board's lawyers are telling him to keep this in the contract, and that just doesn't. That just, for anybody who's had a lawyer represent them, that just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if you went to your lawyer and showed him the guidelines from the, as though the Supreme Court decision wouldn't be enough, but if you showed him the document that the Mr. Jepson put out, and then showed your lawyer the document from the town's lawyers, it's hard to imagine how somebody that is working for you would sit across from you and insist that you keep the language in.
We don't know what the advice was. We don't know what the question asked was. We don't know if there was a phone conversation, a legal opinion. We don't know any of that. However, I'm just going to believe, I guess is the word I want, that no lawyer, knowing about the Janus decision, and Shipman and Goodwin certainly did, would advise their clients to keep this in the contract. This is
that's what I'm trying to say.
But because it is so litigation prone, it is so clear that language doesn't belong there. So I don't know if there was specific advice. I don't think there was specific advice to keep it in the contract. It was probably more like, if you keep it in the contract, if you keep this unconstitutional language in the contract, you better not enforce it. I mean, that's up to you and your conscience and your bargaining strategy. You better not enforce it because you'd be in deep trouble. And if you get into trouble because you've kept this in the contract, we're happy to defend you at our hourly rates. And the business decision
Right.
as to whether you want to put it in the contract because you're thinking you're getting a concession
Right.
from the union, if you think that, and that's your business decision to do it, we'll defend you. I mean, that's where I imagine most of these conversations
I mean,
went.
and
Yeah.
you're a lawyer, so I don't
Yeah.
want to, but I would almost think the question would have to be, could I keep this in?
Well, until you get your fingers burned.
Well, because,
You know,
right,
I mean,
but it would almost, I would think you don't have to put, the impetus to keep it in would not have to come from your legal, it would almost have to be from you. Listen, how can I do this?
Well, I don't.
Right, we're
that's
speculating.
That's a good question. Different lawyers have different styles, and it could be, if you really want to keep that in,
Right.
we'll defend you. We'll find a way.
Right.
You know, it won't blow up the entire contract if you keep it in. They won't blow up the entire contract. And as I say, your business judgment, if you see a reason to put it in, like tricking employees into, I don't know. It's indefensible to me, but
Right,
it's
so then
there.
What do you think is driving this? Is there something about these, I don't.
Well, as Joe Marone said, and as I think they said on the record, maybe not on this town council meeting, but I think Jim Hutt said, the town and the Board of Ed thought they got a concession from the union by keeping this language in, because it allowed the union, by reason of the text, it allowed the unions to have some employees believe
Okay, gotcha.
that money would be and
gotcha.
could be deducted, giving the unions
Yes.
access to the agency fees.
So in other words, the unions want this in, and
Yeah,
you extract something else in return.
that's
Okay,
hard to
I
believe.
just-
That's hard to believe.
I just-
But that's the scenario we're asked to believe. That's the official version. As I said earlier in the show, we can't give too much deference to the official version, but that's the official version, yes. Then Joe Marone, he was here, he confirmed it. The town and the Board of Ed thought they were getting something in return for this unconstitutional language. The town was going to save taxes, so we can sell out those employees that don't know any better and maybe fool them into not understanding their First Amendment rights. That's the defense. I'm sorry, but it is. That's the defense.
Well, I would say that I agree with you, and
Yeah.
I'm starting to, I was a little slower on this one in earlier, but also, isn't there a really important principle here that
Not too
this is
many.
but shouldn't there be, Mike?
Well, of course.
Shouldn't
That's
there
why I'm
be-
fighting this battle.
Right, shouldn't there be in some circumstances when it's the Supreme Court and it's the law of the land?
Absolutely should.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely should be.
Okay, you shouldn't cherry pick
And I
those things.
and I believe, it is my understanding that many school districts took this sort of language out of their contracts long before the Janus decision. Some may still have it in, but I would like to know how many towns are putting this language in after Janus,
Okay.
after June 2018.
Right.
I bet they're far and few between, because their lawyers have said, that's silly, you got to strike that. You got to strike that language.
Right.
And if the unions get upset, hey, that's what bargaining is all about.
Yeah, and I
mean,
don't want to be, but as like almost, I call myself a lay person.
Yeah.
But my initial reaction was that the Wallingford School Board was being disrespectful to a Supreme Court decision. And,
You're being slick. I mean,
and at a
that's
time
all.
when maybe
That's-
that this is just not a good time to do that, with the courts already under attack. But
So there's, after we did the show, where
Right,
we discussed this about a month or so ago, there was an editorial in the Washington Post. And the editorial, written by a guy called Dana Milbank, said something like this: wow, this Janus decision which prevented the deduction of agency fees without real good consent from employees, it's thought that's going to devastate the unions.
Right.
And many people on the right wanted that to happen because they felt that the unions were, unlike the corporate interests, unlike
Right,
the Koch
I know.
brothers, the unions were influencing American politics too much.
Right,
So if we can
right.
get the unions,
Right.
be ahead of the game. And so this case was brought. This Janice, who brought the case, was a right winger. Okay,
Right.
so he brought it, and everyone said, "Man, those unions are going to be hurting." Not true, according to Dana Milbank. The American Federation of Teachers expected it might lose 30% of its revenue after the Supreme Court of the United States gave public sector workers the right to be free riders, benefiting from union representation but paying nothing. Instead, the 1.7 million union member, the 1.7 million member union, I had to read
Got
that. Got it. The union had a 1.7 million members. They added 88,000 members since Janus, more than offsetting the 84 agency freeloaders. And there's a quote here from the American Federations of Teachers. Everyone knows the name, most people know the name of Randy Weingarten. She's in the public sector teachers union. Justice Alito, who wrote this opinion, put his thumb on the scales of justice for the anti-union ideologues. He said, but it was a wake-up call for everyone. Everyone got engaged, and so unions have been reinvigorated, and it seems like they're scoring victories across the country. Instead of losing membership, they seem to be gaining membership because the thinking is the Supreme Court just went too far,
Right.
and the anti-unionists went just too far. So, again, we'll have to watch it. Final thoughts before we wrap it up for the night? I've drank a full cup of water tonight. A lot of heavy topics.
I don't have final thoughts. I'm sorry, Mike. I had everything I've had to say.
Well, the first thing I have to say, hey, if it's 9 at night at Citizen Mike, we haven't said that in a
Right.
long
Right.
time, but we're going to say that again. Ralph and I are here, and sometimes a guest, on Wednesdays, but you can watch the Citizen Mike Show on WPAA, 9 o'clock on Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays. It's up on YouTube. Yes, it is. Go to YouTube and search the Citizen Mike Wallingford channel. Follow all the usual prompts, and you'll get to this episode. Or let us know through the studio that you'd like an email sent to you with a direct link to the YouTube show, and we will get it to you. Thanks for watching, everyone. Good night.